Ever imagine yourself at the front of a classroom, guiding the next generation of artists?
It's quite a rewarding career path.
It is. And today we're taking a deep dive into the world of fine arts instruction.
With some fascinating insights from RoleCatcher.
We'll uncover what it really takes to thrive in this role, from the unexpected skills you might need.
To the evolving landscape of the art world itself.
Right, because it's not your stereotypical dusty old studio anymore, is it?
Not at all.
So let's start by breaking down what a fine arts instructor actually does day to day.
Well, it's more than just demos, that's for sure.
Right, it's got to be more than just showing someone how to stretch a canvas or mix paint.
Exactly. Think of it as this bridge between traditional techniques
Okay,
and the digital age.
I like that, bridging the gap. So you're teaching where at specialized art schools?
Exactly. Places like fine art schools, conservatories, working with students at the higher education level.
Okay, so we're talking about a pretty serious commitment to art already.
Absolutely. These are students who are passionate about making art their life's work, and you're guiding them through the intricacies of it all, drawing, painting, sculpture, but also, and this is crucial,
Yeah.
the theory and history behind those forms.
So it's about connecting the dots between, say, a brushstroke
Yes.
and, I don't know, the emotional impact of Impressionism or something like that.
Precisely. And RoleCatcher really underscores that blend of practical skills
Okay.
and that deeper theoretical understanding. Because a fine arts instructor needs to do more than just teach how to use a certain type of paint, right? They need to foster a real appreciation for the context,
Yeah.
the evolution of the art form itself.
It's like you're not just teaching them to paint a tree, you're teaching them what it means to paint a tree
Exactly.
and the grand scheme of art history and all that.
And that's what makes it so fascinating, because it requires this high degree of individualized attention.
Oh, for sure. Because everyone's got their own style, their own, artistic voice.
Exactly. And RoleCatcher really emphasizes how vital it is to monitor student progress. But it's not just about grades in this context, is it?
No, I imagine it's more about understanding how each student learns best, what
Yeah.
inspires them, what challenges them.
You've got it. It's recognizing that in a field like art, where self-expression is so central,
Mhm.
feedback needs to be tailored to each student's unique journey.
It's a lot more personal than just checking if they followed the instructions on a worksheet.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
a big part of what makes this role so demanding, but also so rewarding.
And speaking of demanding, let's get real about the work environment for a sec.
Okay.
RoleCatcher paints a picture of studios, classrooms, workshops.
It's a very dynamic setting.
Yeah.
There's an energy to these spaces, You're surrounded by works in progress. You have access to all sorts of materials and tools.
I bet. And I'm guessing that energy can be really stimulating.
Incredibly. And actually, RoleCatcher also points out how technology plays a bigger and bigger role these days.
Oh, right. So we're not just talking easels and palettes anymore.
Not at all.
What, like 3D printers and digital sculpting software and things like that?
Exactly. Knowing your way around programs like ZBrush or Adobe Creative Suite, that's becoming increasingly vital for fine arts instructors. It's not just about preserving those traditional forms.
Mm.
It's about understanding how technology is actually shaping how we even define art in the 21st century.
Like the tools themselves are part of the art form now.
In many ways.
That's really interesting. So we're talking about a career path that requires artistic talent, teaching ability, and you got to keep up with all the new technologies.
It's a lot to juggle.
No wonder RoleCatcher highlights all these skills: active learning, listening, clear communication. Those are essential in any field, but it seems like they're especially important here.
Absolutely. And they take on a whole other significance in fine arts instruction,
Yeah.
Because you're not just conveying information, you're nurturing creative potential. And that requires a deep understanding of how to really inspire and motivate people.
Okay, so let me see if I've got this right. A fine arts instructor needs to be able to break down complex concepts, adapt to all these different learning styles,
Yes.
and create this supportive, creatively charged environment
Precisely.
where students feel safe to experiment and really find their own way of expressing themselves.
That's the heart of it. RoleCatcher's insights really highlight that it's about creating a space where students can push their boundaries and discover their own unique artistic voices. And honestly, that's no small feat.
It makes you wonder, what are some of the things that draw people to this type of career in the first place?
Yeah.
Because it definitely seems like it requires a lot of, dedication and passion.
Well, RoleCatcher does a good job of laying out the pros and cons, and I think you'll find it pretty interesting.
Oh, I bet.
But before we jump into that, I'm curious, from what you've heard so far, what's standing out to you?
You know, what's really resonating with me is that sense of purpose you were talking about. Like, you're not just teaching a skill, you're kind of shaping the future of art.
It's true.
But RoleCatcher also talks about the challenges, don't they? Like,
Yeah.
let's be real, what about the whole financial side of being a fine arts instructor?
Well, it's interesting because, you know, that stereotype of the starving artist.
Yeah.
It's not always accurate. In fact, RoleCatcher points out that the job outlook for fine arts instructors is actually projected to grow.
Okay, so that's encouraging.
Yeah. It's good news for job security. But it's not always, you know, a smooth upward trajectory, especially when you're first starting out.
I can imagine. Getting your foot in the door at a university or art school, that can't be easy.
Exactly. And the competition for those coveted teaching positions, it can be fierce. And RoleCatcher highlights that income can fluctuate a lot,
Oh, I bet.
particularly in those early stages of your career. You might be juggling like adjunct positions at multiple institutions, which can be incredibly demanding, both in terms of time and just like the energy it takes to be on in all these different settings.
So you really need that passion to keep you going.
Absolutely. And you need a good dose of entrepreneurial spirit, too, because you're essentially running your own small business in a way.
That's a good point. I never thought about it like that.
Building a strong network within the art community, that's crucial. And it's something RoleCatcher emphasizes throughout. Like they talk about attending exhibitions, going to museums, really immersing yourself in that world.
It's not just about, like, staying up to date on the trends, is it?
It's more than that. It's about forging connections, building relationships that could lead to all sorts of opportunities down the line.
So it's almost like your network becomes an extension of your portfolio, in a way.
Exactly. It's a
Yeah.
way to showcase your commitment to the field, your genuine passion. And that ties into something else RoleCatcher mentions, which is the sheer workload of being a fine arts instructor.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that.
This is not your typical 9 to 5 job. You're prepping for lessons, you're providing feedback, you're mentoring students outside of class time. It often spills over into evenings and weekends. It requires a certain level of, well, dedication, I guess.
Definitely. And on top of that, you've got to be able to handle a pretty diverse group of students, right?
Yeah.
Each with their own artistic goals and learning styles.
Absolutely. And that's one of the biggest rewards of the job, honestly, but it's also one of the biggest challenges. RoleCatcher talks about this need for flexibility and adaptability. You might have a student who's a natural sculptor, but they really struggle with color theory or vice versa. It's your job to kind of, I don't know, meet each student where they're at.
Right, like figure out how to unlock their potential, whatever that looks like for them.
Exactly. And help them develop their own artistic voice, even if it's different from your own.
You've almost got to be like an artistic coach.
I love that analogy. You're helping them build a creative practice that is, you know, sustainable for the long haul. Because being an artist is a marathon, not a sprint, right?
Right. And just like a coach, a fine arts instructor needs to stay ahead of the game.
Right.
What were you saying before about technology changing things?
Oh, absolutely. RoleCatcher is big on continuous learning. Reading publications, keeping up with those emerging technologies, experimenting with different mediums yourself.
So even though you're the teacher, there's always that element of you being a student as well.
Always. The art world is constantly evolving, and to really guide the next generation, you have to be engaged in that evolution. And those skills, the active learning, the critical thinking,
Right.
those aren't just for your students, they're essential for your own growth, both as an artist and as an educator.
It makes me think about, what does career progression even look like in a field that's so much about continuous growth and evolution? Does RoleCatcher say anything about that? So we've talked about the demands, the rewards, this constant need to evolve and learn as you go. But what does upward mobility actually look like for a fine arts instructor? Like, where do you go from those early teaching positions? Does RoleCatcher touch on that at all?
Yeah, they actually outline a pretty typical progression. You know, you might start out as an adjunct teaching a course or two at different places.
Okay.
Building experience, kind of honing your teaching style as you go.
So it's like paying your dues, getting your feet wet in a bunch of different environments.
Exactly. And as you gain that experience, as you make those connections, you might land a full-time position somewhere. Maybe even end up leading a specific program within a larger art department.
So instead of just teaching one sculpture class, you're overseeing the entire sculpture program.
Exactly. And RoleCatcher points out that higher education can be a big factor in moving up the ladder.
Like getting your Master of Fine Arts.
Yeah, or even a doctorate. Those degrees can really open doors to those leadership roles.
It's not just about being an expert artist yourself.
Hmm,
It's about being an expert in teaching art.
that's a great way to put it. And that expertise, that level of mastery, it often translates to higher earning potential as well.
Which makes sense. More responsibility, more expertise usually equals higher pay.
Right. Those department head positions, for example, they come with a lot more responsibility, but there's also more stability, and
Yeah.
opportunity to really shape the direction of an entire program.
Now that's an exciting prospect, to be able to have that kind of impact on the future of art education.
It's pretty incredible. Okay, but I want to circle back to something else RoleCatcher talked about because I thought it was really interesting. Portfolios.
Okay, yeah. They said a strong portfolio is super important for aspiring instructors.
Which makes sense, right? Because you're showcasing your skills, your artistic style.
Right, you're basically saying, this is what I can do, this is the kind of art I make.
Exactly. But then they threw out this really thought-provoking question.
Oh, yeah.
They asked, what if your portfolio also showcased your teaching skills?
Ooh, that is interesting.
Because a traditional portfolio shows what you can create.
Right.
But as an educator, there's this whole other layer to it, isn't there? It's like, how effectively can you guide other people to tap into their own creativity?
So it's almost like you need a second portfolio, one that
Sure.
shows your art and one that shows your teaching.
That's a really interesting way to think about it. Imagine if you could somehow demonstrate your teaching philosophy,
Okay.
your ability to make those complex concepts accessible to students, your knack for inspiring them.
Oh, I love that. So instead of just a collection of your best work, you'd have examples of student projects,
Yes.
maybe some testimonials from students you've worked with.
Or even just a really well-crafted statement about your approach to teaching, your philosophy on art education.
I'm even imagining like video clips of you teaching.
Yes.
Yeah,
Like a highlight reel of you in action engaging students in the studio.
exactly. So you're not just telling them you're a good teacher, you're showing them.
It's about showcasing the art of teaching itself. And I think as this field gets more and more competitive, that kind of portfolio could really set someone apart.
Yeah, because it shows you're not just passionate about your art, you're passionate about sharing that passion with others.
Exactly. And that, to me, is really what makes a great fine arts instructor.
Well said. So for anyone listening who's dreaming of guiding that next generation of artists, it's a challenging path, no doubt, but it also sounds incredibly rewarding.
It really is.
And what I'm taking away from this deep dive and from the insights RoleCatcher provided is that it's a field that's constantly evolving. The art
Yes.
world is changing. Technology is changing how we even define art.
It's true.
But at the heart of it all is that human connection,
Mhm.
that passion for nurturing creativity in others.
Couldn't have said it better
Sorry.
myself.
So if you're feeling inspired, if this conversation has sparked something in you, remember, this is just the beginning of the journey. And RoleCatcher has a ton of resources available, from interview tips to salary insights, to help you navigate every step of the way.
Don't be afraid to reach out and make those connections because you never know where they might lead.
And on that note, we'll wrap things up here. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of fine arts instruction.